Hey, welcome to the Mothership Explores. We have a very, very, very special co-host today. You all know her from that rabbit hole that she pops out of. It's the good Katie.
Hi, Laura. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Katie from Down the Rabbit Hole at Bedtime, and I'm so glad to be on this podcast with you, Miss Laura. Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled that you agreed to do it. I'm grateful, especially, right after Christmas. I'm sure you have stuff to do and dogs to take care of, and yet you're taking the time out to do this. So I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good for me as a mom to do things for myself sometimes. Yay! And so I'm glad I get to talk to you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, today we're going to do something that's a little controversial, or could be, but I want to make it clear that this is purely for entertainment purposes only. We're going to be talking about Ruby Franke and kind of taking opposite sides, like, maybe a defense and a prosecution, sort of, where Katie's the prosecutor and I'm the defense. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that does. I think I'd be a good prosecutor.
Yeah, I think you would be too. I wouldn't want to be your target.
Although I might switch sides now and then because it's a very complicated situation with a lot of layers to the story.
And lots of layers that we don't even know about. So we're just going by what we've seen. And, there's so much more to it. I hate to, that she's done certain things that are terrible and wrong. And there's no doubt about it. There's no getting around it. She has done wrong. But my question is, what led up to this?
Yeah. And I think so many people have watched her for a long time on YouTube, but how much of that was the real of their lives? We can't say for sure either. So we're going off of assuming that some of what we've seen on her YouTube channel is most likely how they really did live in real life. So we kind of have to start with that premise as well. I know that there are so many people who have been super critical and judgmental of Ruby and her family and the way that they chose to use YouTube. And I kind of have some different feelings about that, but I am really disgusted by what it turned into in the end.
Yes. Any case of child abuse is disgusting.
Of course.
I think Ruby was misguided a lot by Jodi Hildebrandt. I think that she truly believed that her children were possessed by evil, and she was doing what she thought was right by getting this evil out of them.
Because Ruby and her family, they're members of the Mormon church. So that's important to start off with. They're part of from what I understand, they're part of the mainstream LDS. I have done a couple of videos in which I looked at like the Lori Vallow case and some other like mainstream Mormon LDS murder cases. And when I went down that rabbit hole, something that I discussed on my channel is the idea of magical thinking within the Mormon church. Okay. So for a lot of, I come from, my background is my grandparents who raised me were Catholic. So coming from kind of a mainstream form of Christianity, our Bible, our leadership, it goes back so many years that many people come at it with an ability to say that these are stories that were created to teach us certain values and rules in our life. But something that I really saw when I delved deep into the mainstream Mormon church is a hardcore belief that what happened, because it happened such a short time ago here in the United States based upon their faith, is that there is a true belief in magical thinking. There is
it's based on magical thinking. Yes. Finding golden tablets that, magically disappeared with Moroni.
Right. So there's a true belief that this really happened. This is not a story that's being told. And there's a belief in prophecy and that it can happen today. Now, of course, that's not everyone. And I don't think either one of us want a blanket statement that there's something, terribly wrong with the Mormon faith. But it is something that we are seeing in a lot of these cases that have come out in the news: prophecy, magical thinking, fundamentalist beliefs that are so strong, people are almost mind controlled by what's going on within their own community. And, it's possible that that's some of what was happening with Ruby.
Right. And I'm going to point out that we are not attacking the Mormon church or the Mormon faith in any way, shape, or form. This is just,
Right.
you could say that all religions have some magical thinking.
Exactly. And I totally agree with that. And I've seen that, I've lived all over the world. I've seen all kinds of things erupt out of every different faith. But we cannot deny that some things have come up, some very popular things recently having to do with people who are involved in the Mormon church. So here's another situation that we can look at and dissect.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So Ruby Franke, did you ever watch her channel? What do you think about family vloggers from the start of all of it?
I did not watch 8 Passengers. I didn't even know who Ruby was until this all erupted. I've done a lot of watching since then. I've watched a lot of Mormon podcasts.
Yeah.
And I watched the interview with Jodi Hildebrandt's niece, Jessie.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And
on the Mormon podcast stories. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was another woman who was on with I'm so sorry, I can't remember the man's name who does the Mormon podcast.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Podcasts of Mormon stories. But yeah, there was a woman on there by the name of Lauren, who, it was pretty informative. It seemed like they had a lot of insight into this.
Yes, they did a really good job on that YouTube channel, dissecting what was going on with Jodi Hildebrandt. But before Jodi Hildebrandt, there was the 8 Passengers YouTube page that became wildly popular, Laura. It's insane how many followers they had. I think they had over 1 million.
2 million.
Subscribers. 2 million. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so they were extremely popular. I believe that they were a huge part of the Mormon community. People watch them to kind of, see this Mormon family, see themselves reflected on YouTube. So you could consider them influencers or leaders within the community. And I remember seeing some interviews with Ruby in which she said, Laura, she was making millions of dollars off of her YouTube channel. So it's, when you really think about it, it's shocking the amount of money that she was able to make from that. And I wanted to say from the start that one really interesting thing about all of it, they did get a lot of backlash for all of the strict parenting that they did, heavily strict parenting that they did on that channel. But what I find incredibly interesting, and I think people really need to think about and dissect, is the fact that Ruby walked away from that channel. She didn't lose the channel. She didn't get any strikes. It wasn't taken away from her. She hadn't done something where YouTube said you cannot use this channel anymore. She walked away from creating that content and making millions of dollars in order to join Jodi Hildebrandt in this therapy, almost like cult. Isn't that quite interesting? To me, that speaks to she believed. She was a true believer in whatever she was doing. She walked away from millions of dollars.
Yes, that's very telling. It's very telling. You would have to really believe that what you're doing is the right move to walk away from that.
Exactly. And when I saw her do the interviews about it, she said, I did this for my kids. I knew something was wrong with my kids and they were suffering. We had millions of dollars. We had everything we wanted, but my kids were not okay. So she really must have believed that, is my thought.
I think that at that point, she had been under the clutches of Jodi. At that point, she was right under Jodi's wing and was being fed a lot, because it was sure beneficial for Jodi to have Ruby on her team.
Right. Who benefited the most from that relationship?
Let's see. 2 million subscribers.
Yes. And they started a YouTube channel together, almost like Jodi tried to recreate. Yeah. So we've got Ruby, this mom who had the potential to keep making millions, walk away from it. We do know she was getting a lot of slack from people around her, but I want to be honest with you, she didn't seem to give a whole lot of craps about that from my point of view.
Yeah, what I saw. Yeah, from what I saw, she was really convinced in that what she was doing was the right thing. So what other people said it was irrelevant.
Yes, I really got the feeling that that wasn't a part of why she left the channel. It was almost like that the controversy just brought more attention to her. I think she left the channel because she really believed in what she was doing. It's here that I want to mention. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing I wanted to point out that, part of the reason why she had so many subscribers could have been because there's really this mysterious thing about Mormons that people are very curious about.
Yes.
And to have someone who is a Mormon with a bunch of kids, which always fascinated me, honestly, have them open up their home and show you what they're doing probably piqued a lot of interest.
Yeah. And I would say, based upon what I've seen, they were a very Instagram-worthy influencer type filming couple.
Oh, yeah. They were all very good looking, too. They're easy on the eyes.
Looked a certain way. Their home was set up a certain way, which is why sometimes I do question how much of it is real, how much of it isn't, because I've definitely seen behind the scenes of some of these situations where it can be very staged, so I question that. I also wanted to mention, and we kind of talked about this before meeting tonight, that as Ruby, her channel exploded and she was popular and she's making money, all this great stuff is happening to her. Her family members, to include her sister, her sisters decided to get in on the action of being on YouTube, of becoming influencers, of expanding their social media. And she has a couple of sisters who are also running channels and other social media like pages where they make a good amount of money. And from what I understand, that started with Ruby. Like, she brought them in, she put them on her channel. She said, like, go check out my sister's channel, go do this, go do that. And they kind of had this whole Mormon influencer scene locked in, momming influencer scene locked in.
Now, I didn't watch any of her sister's channels. Now, were they as strict as Ruby? Or are they?
They were different. But many people have spoken out and said that they had some of the same types of philosophies and ideologies. Like, I know that one of them has a video where she describes like blanket training, which a lot of people have been like, that's just like what Ruby would do, so
we know about that from the Duggars.
Right. So there's a little bit of back and forth about that, because those sisters have come forward now and said, like, we don't want anything to do with Ruby. We're not like Ruby. We're not the same. We don't do that. So they're really pushing away from all of that. And no, they didn't show some of the really extreme scenes that Ruby showed on her channel. But when you look at like, oh, they do blanket training, they have some of the same ideologies, people are still suspicious of them. But it is interesting to me the way she kind of uplifted her whole family. They've made a buttload of money. They've supported themselves. And not only that, Laura, but these people, they're getting like promotions. They get free stuff for their kids, free stuff for their homes. That's kind of like the lifestyle that Ruby and her sisters have been living for a little while now.
Isn't that what most of these family vloggers are trying to achieve, is the same as what Ruby got? Free stuff.
This is where we start from. We've got this whole family kind of coming together on social media. They have a certain way of being. They're living off of the proceeds of social media, and they're presenting their life in a certain way. And then Ruby decides she's going to leave social media and seek out this like enlightenment.
Right. She wants to get out of distortion.
Right. Yes. Do you know what distortion is?
Well, it's distortion. It's not seeing things for what they really is. when you're not being completely, according to Jodi, when you're not being completely honest, you're not having accountability, you're not connecting with other people as you should. And anybody who doesn't follow Jodi's, guidelines, they're considered in distortion.
Yeah, it makes me think that despite having all this money, despite having all this fame, despite having all this success, Ruby was feeling empty in some way, shape, or form. That she would go to chase after, like, this reality still isn't good enough. There's something else that I need.
I think
that
Ruby also mentioned in one of her podcasts, because I've watched clips, that she was always trying to, find a better way, which makes me nervous because I actually have a quote on my Facebook saying, always trying to find a better way. I'm taking it down. Taking it down. So she, probably felt that she reached her maximum potential on YouTube with her kids. She had done as much as she could within her abilities as a mother, and she sought out more to do even more for her children through Jodi. And then she probably learned that they were all possessed, And
it's hard because I hear what I hear you saying, and what I feel too is like, I can really relate to the feeling of like, what else can I do for my children? I'm not at the height that Ruby was at. Everybody has their differences in their own journey of motherhood, right? But for me, I am always seeking, I am always thinking, what else could I be doing? Should I be doing? That's a thing that's hard to let go of, right? In your own motherhood journey.
But her core values are very different than yours. And she was using the philosophy of her religion as how to do better. Whereas maybe you're using, how can I better educate my children? How can I better entertain my children? How can I make my children happier? I think she's looked at it in a very different way. How can I ensure my child goes to heaven or the planet or whatever it is?
Yes. That is a very different basis to start from. Yeah, so we've got all of these things like swirling around in the mind of Ruby, and then possibly also the people around her, because at some point her husband must have been a part of it on some level. We don't know everything that's going on with him.
Yes, but Kevin had to get rid of him real quick.
Yes.
He didn't want him around.
But at first she did incorporate him into, because he actually was videoed on some of their like promotional material for Jodi's therapy sessions. So at first,
I'm sure
they kind
Jodi
of enveloped
had to
the whole family.
Make it right. She had to make sure that it looked like she knew the situation well enough to kick him out. He needs to go.
Yeah. Right. So she took a little bit of time to kind of invite them in, make them feel a little bit comfortable. And then once she had Ruby kind of under her power, was able to separate her from her husband. Yeah.
Right.
So
and
then Ruby is alone with Jodi.
To other couples.
Yes. And that really came out on the Mormon Stories channel. Clearly this has been done before with Jodi over and over again through this counseling that she does with people around her.
I think the other guy in question, his name was Alan Steed. Does that sound familiar?
Okay. That's right. And he is, Alan is a young man who, of course, please, do your own research to find out about his entire story. But his interaction with Jodi was one of he went to her for counseling with his wife, and had a very negative interaction. And it really ended up affecting his entire life.
Yeah, she broke all the rules of a therapist by going back to the church and to his university and actually telling lies about him. And this was over a dispute, according to him, over a bill. She was billing him $2,000 a month. And he's like, wait a minute. And then she went and ruined his life. because he
money,
didn't want to
money,
pay it.
money. That's
It's
interesting
all
to
about
think
the dollar.
Yeah, ching ching for Jodi for sure. And one thing that is interesting to me is Jodi has not brought forward her own family. She has some children.
Right.
I'm aware of who they are. They actually have a social media presence, and I've looked into it, and it's quite interesting, to say the least. So it's interesting that she wasn't bringing her kids onto her therapy session, whatever, and talking, very publicly about that. Maybe she talked about it to people when she did their private sessions or whatever. But I don't see I don't know that her family was that successful, is my understanding. But I don't know that for sure, but it's just based upon the little that I've read and seen,
Well, I know they're estranged from her. I mean, Jessie said in her interview that Alex is her daughter. Alex said that she can't be around her mother anymore because if her mom told her the sky was yellow, she would believe her, because her mother has this crazy ability to get inside your head and your soul. They're afraid of her for that reason.
That's frightening.
Yeah, she's like the master of masters of manipulation.
Yeah. So she wraps Ruby around her finger, and then Ruby disappears for a period of time. We don't see her on social media. Her channel just becomes stagnant. They're not doing anything with it. We don't hear a lot about her until the news breaks that her son escapes from Jodi Hildebrandt's house and goes next door asking for water and food. It almost sounds like and it sounds like he was ready to go back home. That's one of the saddest parts about it, is like he just wanted some water, and then he was it's so sad, climb back through the window, and get back in there. I mean, that's the level of brainwashing that was happening among women.
that 911 call when that man broke down, I admit it got me teary.
Yeah, for sure. That was really hard to listen to. And it's here that I want to bring up that when Jodi and Ruby were arrested, and they went to the police station and allegedly started saying, wait a minute, just so everyone knows, our kids cannot be with other kids. Our kids cannot be with other kids. Don't put them with other kids. It's serious. This was released, and people are like, what are they talking about? I immediately went to a place of, they are going to say that these kids were inappropriate with one another or people around them. And the reason that I went to that place is because I have a background of working in institutions as a nurse with children who have committed offenses. So I kind of was aware that they were using a lot of keywords that therapists would use if like a child is not safe to be around other kids or whatever. So I was kind of waiting for that to come out. And that is one of the accusations. We have no idea if it's founded in any way, shape, or form, but it's an accusation that has been made. Is that these
Did they
kids
both make that accusation, or was it just Ruby?
Just Ruby, as far as I know.
Now, wouldn't that kind of backfire if you are saying your child is capable of this, but you haven't done anything about it for all these years?
Right.
I mean, her attorney surely didn't advise her to belt that out in court, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Once again, I believe that Ruby truly believes that all of this is really going on. Whatever, we don't know the whole story. I can't even begin to put together what she actually thinks happened, but she has put forward like these kids were inappropriate. I'm just going to say it like that. I've read more, but I'm not going to give all the details. They were inappropriate. They did A, B, C, D for a long time. I just found out about it. That is something that she says. She found out about all of it recently. And in order to, I guess, heal them or, get rid of these awful behaviors that they're participating in, she took them to Jodi, who then led her to do all of these things. So this was very interesting to me because as a nurse who's worked in these facilities, I have seen so much, Laura. So much.
Yeah, you're far more educated on this than I am. Psych nursing was not my forte.
But it's like more educated on the realities, because I think a lot of people, like, I'm sure you have read and know a lot about how you handle different types of situations, mental health issues. But when I actually got into these facilities and I was able to see how in reality, this is how things are done. In reality, this is how it operates. It was quite eye-opening and interesting and hard to be around, to be quite frank. So one thing, I could say so much about it, but I'm just going to say this in relationship to Ruby. I had a lot of parents, because I would be like the charge nurse, and I had a lot of parents that would come to me. They're being brought to this facility with their child, and I guess the police are trying to get them to sign paperwork for their child to be, taken care of at this facility. And we need the legal paperwork filled out. And before they decide to like force the parents or force the kid to stay at this facility, they're going to try to get the parents to sign it over without being forced. Okay. So for me, I would get a lot of phone calls from these parents who are like, I'm so scared. Please tell me my child is going to be safe here. What kind of kids are there here? Are there kids that are going to scare them or do horrible things to them? Or is this facility, like, it's not like home. They were scared out of their mind, Laura, about leaving their child there. Okay?
Understandably.
Totally understand. And I would have to tell them, you think I'd be like, oh yes, we're going to be 100% safe and we love your child as if they are our own. That is not what I say to them. I cannot say that to them.
Well, you can't guarantee anything in a hospital setting. That's puts you up for a big liability.
Right. That is not what I cannot take away.
You say we do our best.
Right. I cannot take away the very logical and well-placed fears of leaving your child at a facility where we house other child S offenders. I would have to say to them, we're here to do our best to make this the safest environment possible. We do the best we can with our kids. I would have to give them real information about the kind of kids that are going to be housed there with their children.
So parents were not allowed to stay.
No. In all the facilities,
this is a locked facility, right?
Right. It's a locked facility. And I've been on like acute hospital wings where, again, parents are not allowed to stay. And so we may have children on that ward that have schizophrenia, housed with children that have depression, housed with children that have autism. And I cannot say to you that your child is never going to be around another child who's violent. There are violent kids here. There may be 1 out of 30 that's violent, but they are here.
Right.
We promise that we will do everything we can to keep your child safe. We have a one-on-one, but is your child going to see someone get violent? They might. So you're having to say things to parents that scare the shit out of them. Now, some parents will say, oh my God, I actually feel better because you're being real with me. Like, okay, I get it.
That's how I always was. Yes, at the hospitals, when with Tyler, the 3 years of time that we've spent in hospitals, it was the physicians and nurses who were real with me that I trusted.
Right. So maybe sometimes we got that response, which was good, that I felt that they had a realistic idea of, no, we're not going to be a second family, a better family, because whatever's happened in your family, you're feeling bad about. You feel like, I can't help my child. Can you fix it? And I can't tell you I'm going to be a better family for them. We're not a family. We are a hospital. This is what we provide. So I bring all of this up. This is a long story to say that Ruby Franke, if she was brought information, or Jodi told her information, or the kids did information, who knows, that her children have been acting inappropriately, she's looking down a long, scary tunnel of, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do with my kids? I know that as a part of the Mormon church and Mormon communities, they are very, very hesitant to seek out psychiatric care. They are hesitant about medications. They can be. I'm not saying all are, And
there's so many sectors to the Mormon religion. So many.
That's so true. That's true as well. But even so, even if it wasn't about Mormonism, anybody would have that fear of like, go drop my kids off, go tell the authorities that my kids did something improper. Oh no, let me see if who can I get to help me handle this on my own?
Do you think there is a possibility, and I know this is a real stretch, that Ruby said that to keep her kids away from other kids, like problematic kids?
I don't think so. I really got the feeling that Ruby was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think so. I thought that she was like, my kids are not okay. Don't put them around other kids. They've done bad things and they'll do them again. That's
Since
so
when
sad,
does she care so much about other children? You know what I mean? Like, why is this her mission to get this out in court? To protect other children? I don't know.
Well, I didn't want to say, but I will, and then you can think about whether you want to include it or not. But she claimed that her children had been inappropriate with their cousins as well. And she didn't want them going to live with their cousins because of this. So,
how much you want to bet those kids were engaging in normal play?
Totally possible. Totally possible, or nothing at all, Laura. There could have been no
if I were
play.
Ruby's kid, I would have been strung up by a tree for the stuff I did when I was a kid. My Barbies were rocking that camper, let me tell you. Ken and Barbie were busy.
Well, thank goodness for Ruby's sake, it wasn't Barbie and Barbie. Then you'd be even in more trouble. Totally. And now it's pretty extreme what Ruby's alleging. She's saying from the age of 3, this child was doing A, B, C, D.
Well, where the hell was she if he was doing this at 3?
That's what everybody is asking. How did they have access? But with all this being said, we know that Jodi has a history. Jodi, the therapist, has a history of making people believe that really crazy things happened to them or happened to people around them when they were very young. It's all been forgotten. They're hiding it. She allegedly caused her niece to believe she had abortions when she never did. Just really crazy things that most of us would be like, I think I would remember if that happened to me. Right. So
but she was in distortion, so maybe she didn't. That's probably what she said. She was in distortion. How could she remember?
Right. And that's why I do believe, though, that Ruby does think that all these things happen, because I think there's a history of Jodi convincing people that they happened. Yeah. Right.
She's a master manipulator.
Right. So I think that Ruby did believe it. So Ruby gets to jail and she's like, oh, wait, my kids, like, keep them away. And then we all find out about the kids, which is so sad for them. And I know that the kids had to be one of the kids at least had to go to a house where there's no other kids. All this stuff is happening.
Well, wasn't that the same little boy who escaped from the house that she was pinning? Mm-hmm. She seemed to really target him for everything.
Yeah, she did. And that's something else we can talk about. So on the 8 Passengers channel, many people were questioning if the 2 younger children, who are the ones who were involved in this situation, possibly had ADHD or autism. Because there were like some minor signs, and I don't remember seeing things that made me think that, but other people were commenting. Before any of this happened, did these kids have some of these neurodivergent issues going on? And it almost seemed like that was like killing Ruby because her older kids had maybe been a little bit more compliant, and now these younger kids are harder.
Right.
So you've got that coming up as well. Like, what's going on with the kids on just a very basic level? They're a little wilder. I have
a question for you. With 8 Passengers, did she start off as strict and militant as she was toward the end? Was it always this way, or did it get progressively worse?
It seemed like it got progressively worse, but many people would question Did it get progressively worse because that was really what was happening? Or did they need to up the ante on the channel in order to get more views?
Right. Keep everybody tuned in. What's that crazy Mormon lady going to do next?
Yeah. So now you could say, well, for example, when one of her sons says, like, I didn't have a bed for 3 months, it seemed to come up kind of organically. So people have said, like, oh, that really must have happened. But we just have no way of knowing for sure until we find out that these kids are being horribly treated. Now we know that some of it had to be real. Some of it had to be going on because this kid escapes from a house and has been horribly treated by his mother and therapist and whoever else was around.
Was it his mother or was it Jodi with his mother being aware?
Well, according to the most recent court date, Jodi admitted to several things. She pled guilty to several things. One of those things was when the child was being punished, he had to be handcuffed to her or tied to her.
Well, that was after he ran away the first time.
Possibly. Yeah. I don't know when exactly it happened.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It was after he ran away the first time. The punishment was to be handcuffed to her.
Right. So she had some participation then, right? And then she said that they would do a lot of other things. It sounded to me like what she was pleading guilty to was participation and actually doing the things that caused this child to have all these bruises and all these cuts and skin sloughing off in the sun. I mean, just horrible things that, it did sound like she was a participant, but maybe more will come out about that once.
But Ruby wasn't living with Jodi, correct? She was living at her home and she would travel to Jodi's.
I think that's up in the air, Laura. I think that's really up in the air, but I could be wrong. Have you heard otherwise? Because a lot of people were saying they thought she was living.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
A lot of people have said that she was living with Jodi, that the other kids were getting left at the house, at Ruby's house. There would be kids alone, and Ruby would not be there, and maybe some of the kids would be gone too. Now, was she traveling or was she at Jodi's house? Some people were saying she was at Jodi's house.
See, it was my understanding that, like, Sherry called her eldest daughter called the police for a well check because the kids had been alone for 5 days. And this was before the kids had, the little ones had been sent to Jodi. So it was my understanding that basically the little ones were sent to Jodi's house for the 3-month period before RF ran away.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. But people were saying that when Ruby was missing, from the home, she may have been at Jodi's house working on therapy stuff, doing whatever.
Right. Well, she had done a podcast 2 days prior with Jodi. But
Jodi's
house. I know she was there, but I'm wondering because I don't think she was in the area when the police were notified. I think she was back at her house or close to her house.
She had to drive somewhere. We don't know exactly all the places she was. But she was not at Jodi's house when it happened. Yes.
So I'm just wondering, at what led her to hand her 2 young, precious children over to this monster?
And what do you think? What do you think led her to do that?
She believed that Jodi knew more than she did. Jodi had the powers to perform some sort of exorcism on her children, so her children would be freed from evil.
Yes. Okay. So a lot of people, are saying that that's a part of what's going on. And you have said that you would question whether or not we can, in an idealistic kind of, in an ideology type of way, hold Ruby like fully accountable and hold her guilty, find her guilty. And I've spoken a lot here right now saying like, oh gosh, there's so many layers to this. We can see many points at which Ruby, I think, probably was put into a difficult situation, had difficult choices to make, wanted to do the right thing, dependent upon what she felt was the right thing to do, wanted to be a good mom, dependent upon like how she was told a good mom should be or should act, wanted to do the things that would make her kids be good adults. She wanted those things, and she went down a path on which she thought she was going to find those things for her family. Now, where I would come in, because I've looked at a lot of moms who experience some kind of mental health issue, right, Laura, where they may hurt their children, okay, hurt or even, do away with their children. And these are situations in which the mental illness that's going on with the mother can really affect her relationship with her family and specifically with her children. Okay. So I have a lot of empathy for that. I remember watching the trial that happened with the mom in Texas who ended up drowning several of her children. She was in
Andrea Yates.
She was in severe postpartum psychosis. And I was shocked that she was found guilty. I mean, I thought, yes, of course, she needs to go somewhere for her whole life and, and receive help and be held accountable. But the way that people even treated her, who felt that she's guilty, how could she do this? Knowing that she had suffered severe postpartum psychosis, she had no idea what she was doing, and she believed she was saving her children.
Right.
And that she would live every single day of her life completely regretting that, feeling, I can't even, describe the sadness that I knew she'd be feeling every day for the rest of her life. So to watch that trial and go through it, and, it was difficult to see all that. And there have been a lot of cases like that. So when we look at Ruby, it is different. We know that it's different. There are a lot of different circumstances going on here. But one thing that I really want to bring up that leads me down the path of having a lot less empathy for Ruby, and this is just where I am with it, is the fact that Ruby Franke, when I look at all the many women I've researched about, had so much at her disposal to get help for herself and for her kids. Number one, she had so much financial ability to seek out help, to move her kids somewhere where they would be more safe, to get additional therapists, to get babysitters that would come and help be with the children so that they could be safe around each other if you really thought something inappropriate was going on. She had a lot of money at her disposal with which she could have sought out additional help for herself and her children. Okay, that's number one. But number two, unlike a lot of people who I've looked at and researched, moms, even myself, my own situation, Ruby had a lot of family that were heavily involved in her life. She would do things even on her channel where she would take her kids over to her sister's house and leave them over there so that her and her husband could go out on a date night. She could get away. She had people who were supporting her, a community around her that loved and helped her with her children. So as I look at like the path that she took, the way that potentially she does have some mental illness going on, and the way that she was used and manipulated by Jodi, I still can't find the empathy that I have for these other women, because I see Ruby as being someone who had so much at her disposal, so much that many of these other women didn't have or don't have. And yet she still squandered it. She still did this to her children. And so it's very hard for me to find empathy for her.
Okay, I'm going to counter this.
Okay.
Here is a 41-year-old woman with a 12th grade education who has a very strong Mormon upbringing. The LDS Church has recommended Jodi Hildebrandt, who is incredibly expensive. So she thought she was getting the best. She thought she was helping her children. She was spending that millions on Jodi. She goes to Jodi's house and sees a $3 million home and must think, This woman knows what she's doing. So when Jodi is in her mind coming as so highly regarded by the church and being so expensive, she must be the end all. So I do think that she thought she was getting the best. And when Jodi's telling her that her family and her friends and her community are wrong, well, Jodi must be right. I think she put all her eggs in one basket with Jodi. Whatever Jodi said was right. She has she's older than Ruby by a good 13 years. She has far more education than Ruby does, and she's got her history. I mean, she must have ignored a lot of the history, but she does have, the LDS church backing her up.
Right. And I'm sure she did have people who said, she fixed us. I mean, there must be some of that somewhere.
Well, I'm sure that there must have been some reviews on her website, whether they were made up or not, saying, this chick rocks.
Yeah, exactly. For all of these people to be following her, because Ruby's not the only one.
Yeah. So I think in the end with Ruby, she really did think that she had the best, that she had gotten the best. She had found a counselor who had the same religious background and moral compass that she did. What do you think about that? I mean, $2,000 a month, that's a lot for a therapist.
Yes. I agree with what you're saying to the extent that you're right. If she sees that she's paying all this money for this therapist, she may be thinking, aren't I getting the best for my kids? But then I would argue, if she really believed that this kind of treatment of her children is what's best, then I really question what's going on with her soul. I have to say that, Laura, to watch your kids be treated in this kind of way, because I could go to the best. And if they told me, that this type of tactic is what I have to do to my child, I still believe, even if I was completely and then there are times in my life where I've already been completely what do I do? I don't know what to do. Someone help me. I still have some ability to stand up and say, no, that's taking it too far. No, I don't feel right about that.
Right. So you've never considered your children to be possessed by evil either.
That's true. The background, as you've said, the background of having this kind of faith, potentially having thoughts that magical thinking really does exist, could really have influenced her in many ways.
I can only imagine what it would take in somebody's world who believes in that to rid a child of evil.
Yeah. And, I want to say, actually, another thing that you said that really sticks out to me that I had not thought about is the educational differences between Ruby and Jodi. Even though it's not something I would normally think of, you don't know if Ruby has some kind of insecurity about if someone has gone to school and has a doctorate or has a master's or whatever, and they tell me that this is the right thing to do, then it must just be the right thing to do. I've seen that as a nurse. I've definitely seen
that too. I've seen people who assume that because they don't have a college education that they don't know as much as somebody who does.
Yes, I've definitely seen lower income families that come in and just hand you their child because they think okay, I don't know what to do. I'm not good enough. You take them. And then you watch them with their child and they're amazing. They're better than any nurse, any doctor on the floor, taking care of their kid. But you can definitely tell that there's some level of we just trust that because of your degree, you'll be the one who can fix this problem.
And that's the biggest mistake in the world. Just because somebody has initials behind their name does not mean they know what they're doing.
Right.
I've always told
and maybe
people
that was
that just because somebody is in scrubs doesn't mean they know what they're doing at all. You need to find out who you're working with before you put your trust in them.
Yeah. And Laura, I hate to say this, but it's the truth. I have been in many situations as a nurse where I did not know what I was doing. I walked into a situation and was handed something and told to do it and do it now. And it was only by the grace of God and my commitment to like looking at it, researching it, making sure I was doing it right, that it got done correctly. So if you have someone who doesn't really take that as seriously, or they're in a rush or whatever it may be, you never know what kind of care you're going to get. So it is
absolutely.
important. Yeah.
Every nurse has been put in that situation. Trust me,
Right.
self-included. There's been many times. I mean, they threw me in to scrub in for C-sections, and the physician didn't speak English, and he was screaming at me.
Oh God, I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine. Thank God I haven't been in surgery, so I don't want to do that.
It's a real treat.
Yeah. So that is a really good point, that there could be some educational difference between these two on top of everything else. And one other thing that you said that I don't know if we've emphasized enough is that the LDS Church was recommending Jodi. They had a list of people that they recommend, and Jodi was consistently on that list.
Right. I read one thing right before we came on, and I know that she had, the bishops were recommending her. I don't know. I read that they removed her from that list after the Alan Steed, but I don't know if they put her back on or not.
Okay.
But either way, she was well known within the LDS Church, whether she was on a list or not. She was well known. And again, in this big $3 million home, well, gosh, she must be doing something right. She's successful.
Right. And maybe even seeing other people within their church community already, there could be something like that going on where other people recommended her. I will say that
Jodi was extra nice to her too.
Oh, of course. I'm sure. Right. And I do know that it started off slow because they spoke about Jodi towards the end of their channel. Right. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like immediately once they started with Jodi, the kids were over at Jodi's house and they believed everything about it. It was a slow progression, is my understanding of this.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Like, that sounds like grooming.
Yeah. Right. Totally. I still really struggle with it, Laura. I told you before, like, I actually normally always feel like I'm kind of on the side that no one else wants to be on. Like, I always felt very much in the Andrea Yates case. I was shocked that people were so disgusted with her when I felt like I could come up with a million reasons why this woman deserves empathy, forgiveness, kindness, like that we need to dissect the situation so we can help other moms so that it doesn't happen again. I remember just feeling so enraged that I felt like a lot of people were looking at it like, lock her away, throw away the key,
Yes, like a witch hunt.
I felt enraged by that. I have felt that way in many other cases. And yet I do not feel that way about Ruby Franke. I think maybe from having watched her 8-passenger channel, I see that this is like a functioning person, a person who had so much available to her, so much going for her, beautiful kids. Maybe it's that connection that I have where I really see all of it on the screen. That it's really hard for me to find the empathy I've had for other people. I really struggle with it. And even at the end of everything, like once she was taken in, she's been in custody, and even since then she's pled guilty. I have not been very moved by her actions or her husband's actions since all of that.
Oh yeah, well, her husband's a whole different other story that I would like to chat about a little bit. But I do want to go back for a second and say that I do feel that there is a disconnect between Ruby and her children. There is some type of maternal instinct that's missing. There's a link missing somewhere in there. She's not connected to her children in a way that makes her want to throw herself on top of them to protect them like most of us would.
Right. And that's, yes, from day one of seeing her, what I have seen, I wasn't like a continuous watcher of the channel, but from what I have seen, it seems like there was always something like that going on, which kind of fed into, in my opinion, the way that they were able to be so successful on a YouTube channel, because I do think that Ruby was able to look at her kids as actors on a stage, so she was able to make videos that people really could relate to because it was staged. It looked a certain way.
Well, that was a whole different, sorry to interrupt. That was a whole different aspect to this whole story, was that she was so engrossed with this YouTube channel. She even said that she was scared to death that her kids would stop doing things because then she would have no content. She was afraid that they would stand there and stare at a wall, which they should have done. If they had more maturity, they would have like thought, okay, this is how to stop it, because I know they didn't seem like they enjoyed it.
No, and they didn't know. They didn't even know that. You could see they didn't know that they were people outside of their mom. That was my feeling, is that there was so much enmeshment going on there that they didn't realize they could do things to break away from her until that one child, the eldest child, Sherry, left the home. And really, I think she said kind of felt shocked at what she found while she was in college, that people had she said, I was shocked that people had loving relationships with their parents. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, when she had a chance to see the world, to get exposed, then it's always kind of shocking when you leave your parents' home or your caretakers and you see the world and you realize how different things are. And I'm not saying just coming like from an abusive home. I'm just saying from any home, just to see how different things can be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that, for the good and the bad of it. Right. So, she definitely talked about like being put in a situation where she was like, I had no idea other people lived this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's one thing that you mentioned that and I know you've lived all over the world. I've traveled the world as well. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I've noticed is that children are the same no matter where you go. They're all inherently the same. It's what you learn. It's the culture.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The cultures are different.
Yes, the cultures are very different. Mm-hmm. But it feels like Ruby isolated her children so they wouldn't see anything else than what they were doing.
Yes. I don't even understand how they were so isolated, because they did go to school for a period of time on the channel, but they would always be like, I don't have any friends. There's no one I can go see. I don't have any friends.
Well, they moved. I know they moved at one point.
I'm not aware. They had to
start over.
So sad. And they had cousins. And I will say that the sisters have said that at a certain point, the relationship between the sisters and Ruby broke off and the cousins didn't see each other anymore. So there's a whole other level, a whole other piece of the story there, where she broke off a lot of her relationships. And I know the sisters have spoken about, like, there was some kind of major argument between Ruby and her mom, where Ruby was accusing her mom of all these things. And Bonnie, the sister, says, my mom almost had a heart attack because of what Ruby was doing. So there's all these layers going on. And yet mom and sisters showed up in court for Ruby to make her guilty plea. So there's just a lot of layers to what's going on here, for sure. Now, do you want to say something about Kevin?
Oh, well, let's back up real quick. I think I heard that Ruby's family actually sat on the prosecution side.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that too. I couldn't tell. I'm not sure 100%, because it sort of looked like they were all sitting together. There wasn't like one side or the other. But I do think that they were probably there just to be like, yeah, we want to hear the guilty plea. I never got the feeling that it was like, we support you, Ruby. But some people,
they weren't blowing kisses or anything.
Right. As far as we know, I don't know. Crazier things have happened in this story.
Oh yeah. Kevin. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, but I will say this, that I did get the feeling that the family was more there because it's also a protection of the kids for Ruby to plead guilty. So I think they may have been like, look, we're going to show up and support you because it's protecting your children for you to plead guilty. Now they won't have to go to court. So I think it was very appropriate that if that was a situation, that they would be there to say, like, we support you, Ruby, in pleading guilty,
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a problem with it, but there could be other layers of what's going on there.
Yeah, well, you just never know.
Mm-hmm.
It's an onion. Like we said from the beginning, we're only going by what we've seen.
Right. Okay, so what about Kevin? Let's talk about Kevin.
Kevin. Well, what do you think about him staying away for 13 months?
What would I say? I don't know, Laura. Well, I'm in a unique situation because my husband is actually living apart from us right now. So, because for his job and everything. And I would say that throughout our relationship, we kind of started out as like very equal. I work, he works, we, do whatever. Now I've become really like the caregiver, let's be honest, the caregiver for my kids, the caregiver of the home. So I know that some relationships certainly do kind of come down to that, especially at certain points in time where the mother is like very involved, or maybe the only one involved in the care of the kids. Now, there's so much here because he said like he was told he had to leave, but to never check in, I would think my husband, even let's say the husband and I get a divorce or whatever, he would at least be wondering if I was going apeshit crazy with the kids at my house. He knows me well enough to know there are some mental health issues, and he would be checking in to make sure that his kids are okay, at the very least.
You seem pretty healthy to me.
Thank you for saying that. You may not know all the layers.
Maybe I don't know all the layers.
But, yeah. So like, I would say
maybe I'm in distortion. Oh my God.
I think you might be, Laura, and I think you might be. I might. Yeah. So I'm just saying that I can see from my point of view with my own situation that there could come a time in which the mother is very much like, look, I've got to whatever's going on. The kids are with me. I've got the kids, whatever. I do not understand never checking in, never supporting, never, and not only were there kids at the house with Ruby that Ruby was controlling, but there was also Sherry in college who Kevin also wrote off. He could have easily checked in on her and seen what was going on with her. So
she's in distortion. You can't be in touch with someone in distortion. Come on. But didn't she go to school at the same place he taught?
Yeah, BYU, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what Kevin was doing.
Here's my observation. My observation is that he recently filed for divorce for parenting differences, right?
Yeah.
But he hasn't been around for 13 months. So it must have been parenting differences from when he was around. So if there were such concerns about parenting differences that you're willing to divorce your spouse over it, shouldn't she have checked in?
Yes. But do you know what my understanding is? This is what I'm going to say. My understanding is, now we don't have all the information on this. This is just a story that I'm making up based upon things that I've read, based upon stuff on Reddit, based upon what people are saying on the Reddit streets, and some information that has been published in more credible sources. Is that Jodi convinced Ruby that Kevin had a porn problem. And
that's her MO.
Right. And that it was affecting their family and that he shouldn't be around the kids because of it. That was part of the whole, like, Kevin has to be out of the house. Kevin cannot be around the kids. And that maybe the reason that this is all alleged, and this is a story that I'm telling based upon what I've, the little research I've done on Reddit, on the different groups, is that it was kind of like Kevin created this problem in their kids. That maybe he would have had a tablet out that had the PORN on it, and the kids would have watched it, and that's how they would have come across this and how it all started. So we don't know. Laura and I have no idea if this is true or not, but you could see how that is the MO, exactly what Laura is saying. That is what Jodi has done before. She's taken a couple and made like it all about how the husband has some kind of sexual problem. And, then the wife becomes like, oh, I have to protect myself and protect my kids from this. Now, I don't want to say he doesn't have. I don't know. I have no idea. But that is like what she's done before.
Yeah, she's done that to quite a few couples, and I just find it kind of ironic that now all of a sudden Ruby's kids have it too. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
according to her,
Right.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a minute. I also don't think Kevin should have custody.
But do you think that Kevin believed all of that? Because that's where I question. I think Kevin was like, okay, sure, I'll go live somewhere for 13 months, but he didn't really believe like that.
I think Kevin was trying to save his family and doing.
You do?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he realized that Jodi had a lot of power over Ruby, and that the only hope he had was to comply. But at that point, you have to choose between your wife and your kids, and his priority should have been his kids.
Yeah,
Screw the wife.
Exactly. Yeah, and I say that now as a person who, like, if I was the wife and I'm doing something, my husband sees me doing something that's inappropriate to my kids, take the kids. You know, I don't care what kind of shape I'm in. You know, yes, please cut that person out and save those children for sure. And he was not doing that, not at all.
The children always come first, but I don't think that's maybe the case, or that's. I'm not in the LDS church. I've known lots of Mormon people, but I believe that, you know, the spouse comes first, before the children.
And I do.
But in my world,
I think that was part of
first.
Okay, I'm glad you say that, because I feel that way too. And I feel like a lot of people give me crap for that, even on my channel. If I bring it up, they'd be like, well, you have to put your kids are going to grow up and leave, you know, but your husband will always be there. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that so much.
No, I disagree with that. I mean, when you bring children into this world, they didn't ask to be born. You brought them in. They have to come first.
Right.
And it's hard on marriages.
Yeah.
But that's the way. Go ahead.
And your spouse is an adult. That's how I feel. Like, as an adult.
You hope they are.
Yeah, hopefully. I really have had to have this conversation at times where I'm like, you know, if my husband needs something from me, okay, but my child, who's a child, needs something from me. So for me, like, that's going to come first. And so I think that, you know, you want the spouse to be an adult. So I would
hope the spouse would also want to put the children first too.
Yeah. And and sometimes for me, I've had to just remind my husband a little bit about that. You know,
you know, sometimes guys can be a little needy, and
yes, that's what I've seen for sure. So
these are all things to talk about before you have children.
Yeah. Well, but here's the thing. I think Ruby and her husband, Kevin, did talk about all these things, and their whole thing was like, just that the kids were like an accessory. That's the feeling I get. Like, they have to do it. Yeah, they have to do it because this is like what marriage is for, but not that they were like invested in their kids. Right. That wasn't the feeling I got from them at all.
Right. That was, you know, I was telling, God, I'm blanking. Sorry, I'm going to have to edit this out.
Okay.
I was telling Elle that I used to, or was it Nini? I don't remember. But I was telling them I used to have nightmares that when I was a little kid that I was in a large family. Or was it you? I used to have nightmares that I was in the... Yeah, okay, that it was you. I can't remember who I told what to. So I used to have nightmares that I was in the Brady Bunch. Because I was so like freaked out by big families where the kids didn't get any special attention or treatment or were valued in the same way that I was as the baby in a family with only 3 children, and both of my siblings were much older than me. So I was like an only child. And it really freaked the hell out of me to think I could have been in a big family where I would have just like a number.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I never thought of that.
Well, my neighbors were Catholic and had 9 kids.
Okay. So you were surrounded by, so then you thought.
I was like their 10th kid. I was always at their house.
But then you got to go home and have your own.
Yes, I got to go home, and they always made little kind of snide comments about, you know, how I had more than their kids did, the kids of that family. because I did.
Yeah.
And I remember even as a little kid recognizing that I had more because there was me and not 9 of me.
Crazy.
Are we done talking about Kevin?
Do you have anything else to say? Go ahead.
Let me think. And I don't want to say that.
Well, I guess the reality is I don't know that much about Kevin. We know more about what's going on with Ruby because she's the one on trial. But I will say that it really bothered me that when Kevin was pictured, photographed, and videoed like outside of the house right after all this happened, his main concern was like, who broke the door? Can we file charges on my daughter, on Sherry, for breaking the door? I mean, there's a whole video of him.
Yeah, he was very PMSing hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot even imagine. You want to file charges on your daughter in college, destroy her life over breaking down a door to get clothing for her siblings who have been horribly mistreated.
What were on those laptops and the devices that were so important to him is what I was wondering.
Yeah, 100% he was trying to cover up whatever, was going on.
His addiction, right?
Or whatever else. Probably something worse is what I'm thinking. But
I mean,
money,
who knows? Yeah,
money
related, I'll bet you.
Yeah, financial crimes. Allegedly. We have no idea over here on this
pin it all on Kevin. Kevin.
Yes. If we could, we would. But no, I mean, sadly, we know that Ruby is a big part of the problem. We saw her doing the majority of the parenting on the channel. So that's something else to talk about, is that Kevin was always kind of out of the parenting loop on the channel as well. It was primarily like Ruby participating in it.
Wasn't he kind of doing the filming?
Well, I didn't know that was the case. Maybe it was.
Who did the filming?
I thought that she would set up the camera most of the time to film herself, or she would film and ask questions. That was my understanding. I could be totally wrong. I thought that it was mainly like a setup. Like she would set it up and then they'd walk in and talk or whatever. Because my understanding was that he at first was working and worked, pretty much full time the entire, even when she was making millions from the YouTube channel, he was still working.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. That's something to look. We got to follow up on that. We don't know.
I wish I had
Jodi. Jodi was there from the beginning filming. I don't know.
Jodi. I wish I had kind of seen more of the 8 passengers stuff because you know how I was saying that I felt there was a maternal disconnect with her children. And I was just thinking that there was one example of that. And that's a very famous one where her teacher had let her know that the little girl had forgotten her lunch. And she said, well, she's going to have to learn the consequences of forgetting your lunch and go hungry. Yeah. Now, that to me is a prime example of not having any, or not, she's lacking something maternally. Because it's as a mother, what do? We feed our children. That's like the main thing we do as mothers is feed your children. Right.
And the fact that I certainly didn't see when it happened any kind of oh my God, I feel awful. Oh, I can't wait till she gets home to feed her. Even if, because there's some level for me, let me just put this out there, that the way that Ruby parented, it's not how I would parent. It's not how I can parent. I can't parent like that. I can't be that way. But I do believe there are some people who have this kind of strict mentality who still are good parents. Okay. So there's some things that Ruby did that people would totally freak out about that I would be well, some people do that. Some people teach lessons in these ways. Their children may need some therapy in the future. I don't know. I mean, but who am I to say what is
it doesn't constitute abuse though.
Right. And who am I to say what the best parenting style is, except that when you watch and you're kind of she really seems to almost be giddy that this is happening so she can record it, on film. Yeah, and then you sort of you really do feel that there is that disconnect of true caring about the children, so I totally agree with you on that.
That's a good point.
I think a good point. I think that there's not necessarily something essentially wrong. Now, I couldn't do it. I actually spoil the heck out of my kids, and it creates its own list of problems. But I don't think there's something necessarily wrong with saying, look, you have to face a natural consequence of your action. But most people wouldn't film themselves being like, well, I had to tell her, we'll see what happens when she gets home. Most people wouldn't be like just feeling like whatever about it, So I think that and then the fact that it went on and on, that there were always repeated times that it was coming up with another child, and then they couldn't have lunch, and it would just keep going on and on. It's like clearly it's not working.
Yeah, there was an earlier clip that I saw, and this was way before, when I think it was Chad had forgotten his lunch, and she showed empathy for him and said, "I'm so sorry. You're going to have to be hungry. When you come home, I'll make you a nice snack," that she didn't show later. So maybe, remember, I was asking, did things get more severe as time went on?
Well, not only that, Laura, but this is a whole other episode of your podcast. It's the gap there's a big gap between the older kids. There's like a couple of older kids, and then there's a gap, and then there were these two younger kids that were born. So in my opinion, there's something to be talked about and said and dissected with all of that, because from what I've seen in other families and working as a nurse, whatever, like you can really see like a different family structure when there's a gap like that. Like parents will be a certain way with the older kids and a certain way with the younger kids. So I've always wondered if that didn't also.
It's usually the other way around. They're usually more lax with the younger ones.
Yeah, sure. Yes, but Ruby had a huge lifestyle change in that gap, Laura.
Yes.
Like everything completely changed for her. They became millionaires. They moved to a new house. They started getting all this free stuff. I mean, I don't know everything that was going on in their life, but she had a lot of changes. And as I said, people were questioning if the younger kids may have been neurodivergent. I don't have anything to substantiate that. I'm just saying that they were saying, like, it seems like the older kids were maybe a little bit more conforming to the rules, and these younger kids are lacking some ability to focus or pay attention, and people were questioning ADHD, that type of stuff. And so if they maybe just had a different personality or brain structure, that could also contribute to how Jodi responded. I'm sorry, how Ruby responded to them. So there's Jodi so many layers. Yeah, Jodi was there too. They were all, you know. But there's so much going on here. And I don't know if, now what do you think? Do you think that Jodi's going to go to court and fight this? Or you think she's going to do what Ruby did and plead guilty?
I really have no idea. I think there's plenty of evidence against her. She would be crazy to try to say that she's innocent. I think she's going to have to say that she's guilty, but she'll probably put a twist on it and somehow try to blame Ruby for it. But I don't think it will work.
Yeah, so I am really wondering if she's going to plead not. I think she might plead not guilty and try to completely reframe everything about this somehow, some way, because her whole MO is to fight back, is to always be right, is to lead. Yeah,
she's like narcissistic.
Push. Yeah, like I think Ruby might have had some narcissism too, was my thought. But I think Ruby would have been motivated by the fact that these are her kids. This is her family. They probably all came to her and said, there's no way out of this. Even if, let's say you got off, you're coming home to nothing because no one's going to be there for you. So you better kind of take a step back, like plead guilty and like, let's work on your life, But I think with Jodi, like these aren't her kids. Her whole life is her therapy. Her whole life is her success as a therapist. So I think she might have a very hard time admitting guilt or fault here. I think she could. Do
you think they'll bring people in to testify against her, like her niece?
Well, that's one issue that I have. Like, I think that this is just because, my husband, his background in law and everything. I do think that going on things like Mormon Stories podcast or whatever, it can kind of mess up your ability to then testify in court. But I don't know everything about that. So
it's also an entirely different case. But I've been through a medical malpractice lawsuit, so I kind of understand how this works. And it's not always fair. You cannot bring up a history with other people. for this case, even though it shows a strong history of this behavior by her. It can't be included.
Sometimes it can and sometimes it can't, right? Like, so a lot of times it can't, but there are times where you can bring in people, and each state is very different.
If it's because Jessie is her niece, if it would make a difference.
Totally. I think it would, number one, but I think number two, the fact that Jessie has gone on all these social media. Now, I think Jessie did everyone a favor, even just because this kind of her statements, her story, her evidence about, or their evidence about their life, because I think they go by they. I'm sorry, their evidence about their life. It lent credence to all of us being like, okay, we understand that whatever Ruby alleges about her kids probably isn't true. So I think that that was a good thing that Jessie came forward and told their story. But at the same time, my understanding is even if they were to be accepted in court now, the story would have to match exactly what they said on Mormon Stories podcast. And if it doesn't, the defense can bring that up and impeach them as a witness. So there's a lot of issues with that. But I don't know everything about the law, so I don't want to say for sure, but I do know that that's something to be aware of, that all the people that are coming forward and talking, like, you really have to be careful. I, as like my own channel, I'm a tiny little channel, no one cares about me, but even like if I were to have someone come and say, I want to tell you this story about something, if it's going to go to court, if there's going to be a legal issue, then I might be stepping in some really murky water to interview a person on my channel, have them tell a story, and then that story to be the one that needs to be talked about in court. So
you can get dragged
I am glad that, I'm glad that Jessie came forward, but I think
Jessie also said that this was all Ruby, not Ruby, but all Jodi, not Ruby. So that was, but it is partly Ruby because Ruby allowed it to happen. But how, and this is what the whole question for me is, how guilty is Ruby? Because she was, I believe, heavily gaslit and manipulated to the point of not being able to see the nose in front of her face.
But if
there has to come a point where you say, hey, you're hurting my children. This isn't okay.
Right. And if you saw, like, something I think about is, what if there was videotape and it showed Ruby doing some of these things to her kids, like helping tie up, helping, I think if you really saw things like that, you would just deeply question, like, whether she was gaslit or not. How can you do this to these small children? You see this child is malnourished. You see his ribs poking through his skin, I cannot find the empathy for someone, regardless of what Jodi is telling you, regardless of all your, issues with your faith and your mom and everybody who bullied you and treated you bad your whole life, Ruby. Like, it doesn't, when you're sitting there looking at this small child shivering and whatever else while they're being tied to whatever, like, if you can go forward with it, there's something that's missing inside of you. And you are guilty. You're guilty of letting go of your own humanity to serve whatever goal and purpose you've created in your own mind.
She let go of her humanity to serve her spirituality. Maybe.
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate that everything we've said today, we're just chatting. We're not necessarily standing behind each thing we say. We're just throwing it out there to talk about it. So I don't want anyone coming back and saying, well, you supported Ruby Franke, because I don't. I don't know enough to support her or Jodi or anyone else for that matter.
Right. We're asking,
I know someone's going to come back and say that I did.
Well, I think that it's great that you're asking these very valid and very important questions. Because I remember being a young kid watching the Andrea Yates trial and watching the Andrea Yates trial and wondering why people weren't asking some of the questions I had in my head about what's going on with this woman. Why are things like this? So it is important, Laura, to ask these questions, to look at the other side, right? I think
Right.
it's very important to
it's
say.
very important so we can help prevent it from happening again.
Exactly. Because now people are turning around and looking at all the sisters who are still on social media and all the other Mormon families who are on social media with their kids. And not saying that they are doing anything like what Jodi is doing, but let's definitely look at what happened with Ruby and Jodi and figure out why it happened and get it out there in the public so that it doesn't repeat itself time and time again.
Right.
So I think it is really important.
You asked me my opinion about family vloggers, and I didn't answer that. So I'm going to tell you now. My opinion is that I think it can go way too far, and that people get far more obsessed with taking film than they do with their children's actual well-being. I think it would have to take a parent who is very, very self-aware in order to do it safely. So until there are regulations, I am not really for it. I'm not interested in watching other people, quite frankly. I don't see what the appeal is. The only thing that I saw interesting about 8 Passengers is that, again, there's that mystery about Mormon families to me that I find interesting.
Yeah, and then
I didn't watch it.
Right. And I'll just end with, I'm really in support of family vlogging, Laura, because actually for me, watching other families, specifically families with kids with special needs and things like that, has been really helpful to me on my own journey with my kids.
There's always 2 sides to it.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about the good aspects of it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the bad aspects of it.
Right.
I'm saying that there are people out there who are going to use their children as an income. You're saying that there's the potential to educate people about special needs children. And I mean, look what I do. I have a channel.
Yeah.
I show my special needs son, but I'm not vlogging. I am showing events.
And for me, not only special needs, but just generally, like, for me, I grew up with my grandparents. There's a lot of things I have questions about when it comes to parenting that maybe I didn't see in my own family.
Because you're saying that you were not raised in a typical family. So this is your opportunity to see a typical family.
Yeah. Or like just to find out what I want to, find out what other people are doing and what I want to adopt in my own life, because, so this has been, that's something. I would also argue that there are families that I've watched where I can see that they have a special needs kid. I can see that they would have no other way of providing a very safe, wonderful lifestyle for that child.
I know who you're talking about.
Okay. Other than through the income that they receive from the channel. And a lot of people I've watched a lot of people be heavily like critical of these people. And for me, I'm kind of like, I just see the other side of it. Yeah, I can see why you're critical, but for me, I'm like, let them have it. Have at it.
I mean, no, I really do see both sides of it. I'm just saying that because there is bad out there, it makes me nervous.
Yeah, sure, of course. And there's going to be bad. There's, there may be another Ruby Franke, but I mean, it's good to ask these questions. And I'm glad that it at least it's been brought to light that this horrible tragedy was taking place behind closed doors. I think that people are more aware. If we go forward with the trial for Jodi, I actually think that could be really good if she goes to trial, because it will make people more aware of what happened, how it happened. These could be really good things. Yeah.
My last question for you.
Okay.
Do you think that this would have happened with Jodi Hildebrandt doing this severe abuse to these children had Ruby not had a YouTube channel?
I think there's potential that things would have been worse with Ruby had she never had the money, the fame, the YouTube channel. I really think that Ruby has it inside of her to be this kind of person, to be cruel to her children, to not have this connection with them. This is just my opinion. I think she had that potential before she ever did the YouTube channel. And I think being more in the public eye, Jack, just a minute, okay? being more in the public eye put her in a situation where she had to be a little more careful. She got a little bit more backlash from doing certain things, and she had to be careful about what she showed to people and what she did. I think that potentially things could have been the same or worse had she not had the channel. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Well, the whole show's just been, opinions and exploring.
Yeah.
It's
on the mothership.
Nothing concrete. It's nothing concrete.
We took the mothership into outer space and just went on a little.
We did,
adventure.
and I'm not a space freak. No matter what
I love it. I love.
I'm not a Trekkie, man.
Oh, you're not?
I'm not a Trekkie. No, I love the movie. I love the Star Trek movie. That's actually one of my favorite. God, Lee, I'm really incriminating myself for this space stuff.
The new movie or the old
The new one. Okay. The very beginning where the wife is having the baby on the little tiny pod and escaping.
Yeah, everyone loves the new movies though. You're not a Trekkie unless you love the old stuff. Just a minute, buddy. Okay, Laura, I'm so glad I got to join you on the mothership. I have to go back to my mothership.
Okay.
I'm so glad. I'm glad that I got to see you tonight, and I hope you'll have me on again sometime.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll see you soon, Katie Rabbit.
Okay, thank you.
12x11, can you copy child abuse? 12x11, 12x4, if you come back on a child abuse.
Control 12x11, I'll be 17, I'll back 17.
Tampa, this will be at 1961 North. You on drive. Murphy said a 12-year-old male showed up with tape around his legs Thursday asking for help, said he was afraid asking for police.
10-4, you can show me 17.
Tampa, you gave an unknown date of birth, or he did give us a date of birth, but I'm not sure. Spillman. I'll keep looking into that. The RP said he left through the porch of the neighbor's house. 470, control 1036.
Control 12x4.
Go ahead.
I copy that traffic. Myself and 5 are going to be out of the area. We'll be in hurricane intensive for an hour or so.
10-4, sorry, I didn't say that you put yourself off. I will note that. Break 470, control 1036.
Control 4, thanks.
10-4, break 12x11 and 17, just 10-14. Email does have duct tape around each ankle. He's not telling the RP why. And said that there's sores around his wrists and ankles. The RP is becoming emotional regarding the child's health. I'm going to go ahead and have medical stage on this one.
Copy. 1x4323.
12x11, 12x4, or 17, sorry. The RP said that he left from a neighbor of Jodi Hildebrandt or Tagu in Ivan's 54-year-old female. Not sure if they're related. When asking the RP's parents info, he said his mom is Ruby Franke, unknown where she lives.
Copy.
12x11, 12x17. I do have a Ruby Franke spelling with an E on the end of Franke address out of Springville. Only involvement was a traffic offense a couple days ago.
Copy.
He's also saying that there's 2 of his sisters are back at the home as well.
Copy that.
Control 12x11, 23. 12x11, 12x5, we can give me a 21. 10-4.
Control 12x17.
Go ahead.
Do you have an address for that, Jodi?
10-4, 854 Tagu Circle or Tagu Drive.
10-4, can you put that on the CAD, please?
Is looking out the front, go left. It's going to be your first house on Tagu Court on the right.
Copy that, thank you.
RP and the Juber are going to be sitting out on the front porch. No visible weapons. The male is currently wearing a long sleeve with shorts. And medical's 23 as well.
10-4, AT, 3 minutes, medical's in front of me.
10-4, I'll send you Jodi's 27 as well.
Copy that.
3, your welfare check as well.
10-4.
Everything good.
12x511. Go ahead. Hey, 314. The wounds on his leg are pretty Pretty good. 10-4.
Hold at 17. 78, go ahead. Can you run a Rose Frank? 4.
In need of immediate care.
Copy. Control, 20, show myself in 5 heading that way.
I don't have any Rose Frankies coming back in Stillman or in Utah. I did find a Ruby Franke, which I sent to 12x11, showing an address out of Springville. However, only involvement is a traffic offense a couple days ago. 10-4.
Control 12x11 for your 14 as well. The child looks very emaciated.
Copy 81109. 12x5, 12x17, go ahead with me. He's on the phone.
17, this is 3. Will you just make sure that nothing happens until you get people there to look at what's going on?
4, you want medical to hold off to transport to the hospital?
We need to get some photographs first.
10-4, we're going to have him hold here.
Yeah, if he's alert and breathing, just hang out and wait for us, please.
4. 7x1, can you copy a suicidal? 7x1, control.
Good.
Can you copy a suicidal?
Hey, LT, there's a panic room inside the garage. Downstairs, underneath the garage.
Go through.
Passages through the safe door, the Liberty safe.
Yeah, he says it's downstairs and it's underneath one of the garages, and he's calling it a safe room. He said something about Fort Knox, so I don't know if it has a Fort Knox door or safe on it, but that's what he's talking about.
Temple, we've got it, but we can't get into it.
My guess is that would be where they're at. He says it's a large room, it's a panic room.
This one says Liberty Safe Company. It's got a big wheel on the front. Control 30 Alpha 530. Go ahead. You show us out at number 8 on the left. Copy number 8.
The top drones in the air.
Hold on, 23 on 114 Lima.
That one is, everybody still has the U1 drive or the Stand
by, all dies. I believe they're the second one, not U1.
10-4.
Yeah, control looks like we're going to be out of the Taboo one.
10-4, I'll update everyone, thank you.
Control 30-509, we 1063 address, we're on it.
Go ahead.
861 West, Bronze Plateau Drive.
10-9, the street name?
Bronze Plateau.